So the mindset of viewing the difficulties in your life as challenges over viewing them as threats or unfortunate situations that you have to do, the difference between how you view them determines your personal ability and growth and progress. Okay, so in the simplest terms, you need to view things as challenges instead of threats. Okay, Zamradine?
So instead of viewing them as threats, we could view them as like challenges, like you said, or opportunities for growth, we could say.
Right. Instead of viewing it as like, oh, I have to do this, you need to learn how to almost have an inner pep talk or dialogue within your mind that reframes it to be, this is going to be a challenge I get to do. I want to challenge myself. I want the challenge. And if you can reframe your mind to respond in that manner, the likelihood of success increases significantly. And so why did I go down this path? Because I wanted to tie it down to Carl Rogers' psychoanalysis of this idea that if people don't voluntarily expose themselves, the key word is voluntarily. If people don't voluntarily take on that which will grow them, they don't experience the performance enhancers that increase the likelihood of growth or overcoming those challenges for that matter. And so it's of critical importance that everything within your life you proactively or voluntarily approach instead of allowing it to come to you and face you as an obstacle or a threat. You have to choose your problems, ultimately. You have to choose your difficulties. You can't let them happen to you. You have to choose them, and you in some ways have to want them. Okay, do we have any thoughts before I transition into the second part of this? Anybody? Yeah, go ahead, Zam.
So a way we can try to apply that mindset is like we could say instead we want like an easy draw in our heads before the draw comes out to be like, I want the most challenging draw I could get so I can get the best opportunity to grow.
Absolutely. It's just practicing reframing your mind. You know, we have a natural instinct to protect ourselves, right? That's psychologically wired in us from the beginnings. That's an instinct in some ways. We have to proactively reframe our minds to be somebody that wants the challenges. And it's like, why? Well, because they're going to come anyways. Like, you're not going to be able to avoid them, right? You're not going to get out of, if your parents put the vegetables on your plate, you're not going to get out of it. You're going to do it anyways. School, whether you like it or not, you're going to do it anyways. For the majority of you, fitness, if it's on the schedule, the likelihood is you're probably going to do it. The draw, you draw the person you don't like. Well, you're still going to play the person you don't like. Like, you're not getting out of it. So if you are going to face a problem, you might as well take the time to put your mind in the best frame of mind in order to have not only success with it, but the best state of mind in approaching it. And then what will happen is it will be it'll be less suffering than you would originally have dealt with if you almost let it happen to you. We experience less suffering when we voluntarily choose things. And so the experience will be better if you decide, okay, draw comes out, it's somebody I don't like, and you take the time to really view it as oh, this is a challenge. I want that. And psych yourself to want that player. Performance enhancement, it's more enjoyable of an experience. Likelihood of success. Go ahead, Zam.
So what you're saying is basically embrace the struggle or embrace the challenge
Absolutely.
rather than be threatened by it.
I can view it as a threat or a challenge, and I choose challenge, and here's why. Okay? Okay. Are we good? I'm going to transition. Raise your hand if you're good, if you understood. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to transition here. You know, Tyler, that's why when we say fitness and you guys say fitness, you know, that's a great example of you guys doing a good job with that. You know, it's like most people, when you tell them, okay, we're going to do these runs, they moan and complain. Can you practice when it's time to do the runs actually saying, yeah, I want the run? You know, that's a way to practice restructuring your mind, and what a value that would be in your life to be somebody who could do that. Okay, so transitioning here. Why should we choose our problems or our difficulties? Why should we choose them? Well, let's think about this critically here. We need problems, technically speaking. Why do we need problems? Well, because without problems, we literally cannot become the best versions of ourselves. You know, if you win the tournament easily and there were no problems along the way, at no point in the tournament were you ever forced to muster more out of yourself. So you win the tournament, but you don't grow in this manner. In order to grow, you can think about this in the gym. It's like I could go do my fitness and I could lift 5 pounds the whole hour. I completed the gym and, you know, I had no problems along the way. But we all know you didn't get stronger. But not only did you not get stronger, if you do that long enough, you get weaker over time. That's something very interesting to know. And so you win the tournaments or you get through the gym workouts. But if there's no challenge, not only do you not grow, you actually shrink. And so in this ways, we should be very grateful for our problems and challenges in life because they provide us with the opportunity to transform ourselves into a more optimal version. And so then you can imagine we were to ask ourselves even, okay, how could I become the best version of myself? And to that, the answer might be, well, I need to experience the most problems I possibly could, because, well, when you have problems, what it forces you to do is to solve problems. And in that process, we become people that can solve problems. And the greater the problems, the greater the opportunity to solve greater problems. And so the bigger the problems, in some ways, we become better problem solvers. And what a skill set it would be to be able to be the person who can solve great problems. Not small problems, big problems. And so in this way, we need to kind of give a hug to the problems that come forward in our life, because they are the opportunities for us to become the greatest problem solvers possible. And who are the greatest problem solvers possible? They're the people that make the greatest impact on the world. Roger Federer, for example, was the greatest tennis problem solver of all time. Some might say it was Djokovic. That's beyond the point. If you actually think about it critically, the number one tennis player in the world, for example, is the greatest problem solver in relation to tennis. But in order to become the greatest problem solver, you need to have the greatest problems. And so all the problems that arise in your life, you have to view it as a gift, Because these are the opportunities for you guys to become greater problem solvers. So, ultimately, a life devoid of problems is a life devoid of growth. I always tell the story of Alex Donsky, who was a player that we worked with over in the past there. And when he turned pro, he forwent his NCAA career to turn pro. And immediately upon turning pro, he lost 22 main draw professional matches in a row. He lost 22 main draw matches in a row. 22 in a row. 22. Imagine losing 22 times in a row. And then what happened on the 23rd time is he won one match. He finally broke the losing streak. And then what happened on the 24th time is he made his first ever finals in a professional event. And if you ask him to this day, one of the things he'll say is, one of the greatest gifts that was given to me was to go through that struggling period. Why? Because I developed a resilience and a character that my competitors and opponents never had never had the opportunity to. And to kind of add on to that point, let's imagine this. Imagine you had a fear. Well, we can see this sometimes in tennis. It's like we're scared to lose to the player who's 5 years younger than us. Let's just say. I'm just using it as an example. Okay, so let's imagine we're scared to lose to the player that's 5 years younger than us. Okay, so that's a fear. And so we're afraid to face our fears in some ways. Well, what would happen? What would happen if in the next tournament you draw the player that was 5 years younger than you and you lost the match? It's like this. The fear you were hoping to avoid all these years happened. It happened. But now that it happened, is it still a fear? So you lost. In some ways, you were overcome by your fear, but in the process of being overcome by your fear was relinquished. Is that not true? Is not the greatest thing that could happen to somebody to have to face their fear? And what would happen moving forward in your career? It's like, yeah, I used to have a fear of losing to players younger than me, and then it happened. And then what I realized is, well, I faced my greatest fear. I'm not as scared of it anymore because it's happened. I watched that happen with a lot of our pros, believe it or not. Because, when you're in juniors, what happens is usually you won't have many upsets to people younger than you. And a lot of people think it's embarrassing for that to happen or for that to be the case. And then what happens is when they turn pro, obviously, like let's say a player is 27 years old and a player is 22, skill-wise, they're similar now because they've grown older. But all through the junior career, if you can imagine, the 27-year-old was 5 years older. So it would be like an 18-year-old playing a 13-year-old. And then what happens on the pro tour is they play the person that their whole junior career they were scared to lose to because of the 5-year gap, and they lose. And what happens is, yes, they lose, but they face that fear and they become so much freer as a player. They're almost liberated in their mind. They release all that stress that they've been carrying for their whole careers. And so whatever you're scared of, guys, in some ways, I hope it happens. Because what would happen then is that you would realize that you can manage your greatest fear, and then it won't be a fear anymore. Or even if it is a fear, it won't be as great of a fear because you knew you've survived through it. I wish when I look back at my junior career, I lost more of the matches I was scared to lose. Funny enough, I wish. Because what it would have forced out of me is character growth, resilience, courage. So in some ways, I guess what I'm saying is that The problems that you're hoping to avoid, I hope they happen, because I know that if you face your greatest problems, what will happen through it is you may have been overcome by the problem, but you will become a person with such greater resilience and character, and a person who is less afraid of their fears. And so what is a person that's less afraid of their fears? Well, that's a person who's more courageous. So you have to ask yourselves, would there be value in me becoming somebody who's more courageous? And the answer is obviously yes, because, well, then that just allows you to take on more burden in the world, or in your tennis careers for that matter. And somebody that can take on more can overcome more and achieve more as a result. Okay, raise your hand if you're still following. Yeah, of course, you really have to pay attention through these sessions, because I do tend to get quite in depth. And I remember too, when I was in university, sometimes my professors, they would lose, it would be very easy for them to lose you. But if you could struggle to pay attention and really try to follow, what you got out of those sessions was unbelievable. And sometimes profound, and in many ways revelatory in terms of having epiphanies. Okay. Any thoughts or questions before we move on? Okay, we're good. Okay. So far, what we've covered is the notion of becoming somebody that voluntarily faces the things that are put in front of them, and becoming people that are grateful for their problems because they realize through them they get the opportunity to develop character, resilience, and critical thinking. Okay, raise your hand if we're clear on that.